that'll be a perfect scenario,
Right.
Andrew. I was just commenting to a couple of my associates this morning that I was going to be unavailable for a short time while we talked. And they said, well, what are you talking about? So I gave them a 5-minute, and they went, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. One of the elements and the segue that we might have readily available, Andrew, is that there's a sense in which climate change has distracted from the other problems that we face that are incorporated in it. And most people confuse or conflate climate change and environmental impact. And we can solve climate change and still die of bad air quality, bad water quality, bad food, and no soil. I mean, it's easy enough to do.
Right.
So a lot of the protagonists that are attacking climate change issues seem to love to create these distractions to take people's minds off of everything else that's involved in the whole process of environment and climate. So I liked your title. I liked the convergence title. Climate, environment, and food. That's perfect.
That is actually the room we are in here at World Unity Week. So I'd like to welcome our viewers and friends here on Facebook Live and on Zoom and throughout the known universe to World Unity Week and this Zoom room, which is known locally here as a convergence room. It's a place where people can converge, where we can come together and discuss a variety of subjects. Today's subject is climate restoration, which is the title for a job, a task that humanity must accomplish if we are to survive as a species in any recognizable way. It is a job we must accomplish if our children and our grandchildren and down to the 7th generation, and I argue that 7 generations is not enough, that's about 150 years. I want us to be viable for much, much longer than that. So I would say, how about let's start with 7 times 7 generations. Let's go to the next 49 generations and give them the gift of what we received when we were birthed into this beautiful reality on this glorious planet. Let us give them a safe, habitable planet that they can love as much as we have loved it. So here we are launching off into a climate restoration conversation. My name is Andrew Cameron Bailey. I'm an inventor. I'm a former teacher or professor of chemistry and mathematics and chemical engineering and such things. And my guest today is Bill Tooley, William Tooley, who has an extraordinary technology to share with us. He is going to talk about something called the Enviro Farm, which deployed at scale, and Bill, you will correct me if I don't express this correctly, but deployed at scale, Bill's Enviro Farm has the potential to radically reduce emissions into Earth's atmosphere, to turn everything organic, to restore food production to its original pure form, and provide everything from jobs to economic opportunities. It's an extraordinary vision, and Bill and I have known each other for about 5 or 6 years now, I do believe. And I'm going to...
All it's been? Yeah, seems a lot longer than that. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Bill. This is a casual conversation. Anybody who would like to ask a question or jump in the midst, that's fine too. If you want to challenge us, that's fine too. If you have something we've never heard of, we would really love that, because this is the situation, my friends. We as a species have to find each other. We actually have to come up with solutions to a crisis, a looming crisis. We have this COVID pandemic going on right now, which there's a danger there. And the danger is that we get distracted from something we must do, and we must do it now. We must do it 30 or 40 years ago, but we didn't. So now we're really up against it. We have an environmental, a climate crisis that is already well underway, and that is not an exaggeration. So what can we do? Who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? What are the factors involved? So today we're going to discuss the broad overview of what's going on, most of us have the broad strokes of what's going on, and we're not going to go too deeply into that, but we need a little background. And then we're going to enumerate the things we have to do. What must we do to accomplish the project or the endeavor called climate restoration? Okay, and I'm part of a group called the Healthy Climate Alliance, which has something called the Foundation for Climate Restoration. We initiated an event at the United Nations back in September 17th last year, called the first United Nations Annual Climate Restoration Forum, attended by 300 or 400 people, quite extraordinary. So there's a lot going on that's good. There's a lot to report on, and I'm pretty much up to date with all or most of that. So that's the story there. Bill, do you have a comment at this point?
Only by way of introduction, because I want you to lead off with the climate restoration component. But just by way of introduction and clearing the air a little bit, we have a situation today in which one heroic task that needs to be done distracts from other heroic tasks that need to be done. And as Andrew pointed out a few moments ago, we go off down this path and we forget that there's a whole baggage train behind us that's going bad. So to simply belay the pundits who are fighting with each other about, whose fault is climate change and who do I blame and all like that, none of that matters. Suppose that climate change, as we understand it today, has nothing to do with the human race. Suppose it's just a cycle that has occurred over and over, and you've heard this argument, I'm sure.
Yes.
Suppose it was. 100,000 years ago, when the last humans went back in their cave and started drawing pictures before they died of climate change, they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't even know it was happening. They had no idea what was going on. Suppose that's happening again today. Suppose that's what's going on. No blame anywhere, it's just happening. We still have the choice to deal with it or to die. Why would we choose to let our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren not have a place to live because we chose not to do something about something that was happening? When we knew it was happening, we have tools to make it change, and we can fix it. So I want us to enjoy each other's company, looking at what the tools are and how it is that we can go forward, not forgetting any of the important parts that we need, but getting the job done and not pointing fingers or bashing or blaming the farmer, the industrialist, the manufacturer, the smoker, the car driver, whomever you wish to point your fingers at. We don't have to do that. We can come together, and that's really the only aside that I would like before you get started.
All right, Bill, that's a good context, and thank you for that. I have to say, however, that I am in possession, and if I could figure out how to share my screen, I could show a chart that's very interesting that tracks CO2 levels in the atmosphere, sea level, and temperature, of course, and global temperature. And they track remarkably well for the last 420,000 years until about 75 years ago, at which point things began to change radically. And the only explanation for that is human intervention. We have been geoengineering, unconsciously, unintentionally, geoengineering our planet by doing this wild thing of burning a whole bunch of fossil fuels that was well sequestered into the coal and the oil and the trees and on all over this planet. We've ripped down the forests today, right now, today. We're ripping down the Amazon, which is the lungs of our planet. It's a very, very big issue, and this has been known for 100 years. This is not news to science. It is not news to politics. However, we have failed to do what needs to be done. So, Bill, in order to provide a safe, habitable planet for future generations, we actually have to wake up and grow up and show up and do something we have yet to do. And we can do it, and we can actually
Yes.
do it profitably. We can actually make it a business opportunity. Let me just say this, at the Davos World Economic Forum back in February in Switzerland, there was a buzz. The buzz was about something called climate restoration, the subject of this presentation right here, right now. And it was described as a multi-trillion-dollar, I've always called it a multi-billion-dollar, but they called it, and these are the World Economic Forum, a multi-trillion-dollar investment opportunity. Very interesting. So what does that mean? To me, as a one-time teacher, lecturer in chemical engineering, it means that we have a mining opportunity, We have roughly 1 trillion tons of excess waste carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. And the fact is that we can go into Earth's atmosphere and we don't have to go anywhere because it's right here in this room where I am sitting, out in this beautiful field where I am, wherever you are, there is 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide free for the taking. And can we extract it from the atmosphere? The answer is yes. And once we've extracted it from the atmosphere, do we have a plan for what to do with it? Because we've got to do something with it. There are plans that I regard as absurd, such as pumping it 8,000 feet down under the crust of the Earth into a layer of basalt where it will react and become some sort of calcium carbonate limestone compound and never come back at enormous economic cost to whoever's doing that. To me, that's ridiculous. However, I give my apologies to the very respected scientists who are thinking that way. I know these guys, I speak to them, I meet them at conferences. I ask them, where's the return on investment? They look at me as though I'm crazy. And I agree, I am crazy because I believe firmly that that carbon dioxide is a resource. This is the mining opportunity of the millennium. We can in fact turn that carbon dioxide into limestone, calcium carbonate. Chemically, that's not difficult to do. Limestone is the aggregate for concrete. Concrete is the single biggest thing tonnage-wise that humans use every year. We can replace a large proportion of the concrete industry with concrete aggregate accessed from the atmosphere. That's a very big opportunity, a very big deal, and we can sequester countless gigatons of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere in concrete. It's not going to escape from that concrete. It's never going to cause climate damage again. That's only one of the things we can do with the CO2 in the atmosphere. It's a huge opportunity. So I'd like to just, let's go back to the term. Let's define our terms here, or our term, our overarching term, climate restoration. Climate restoration is the global endeavor to restore Earth's atmosphere to the state it was in as humanity and all of the other species on this planet evolved. That we were able to evolve because of a certain range of temperature and other conditions on the surface of planet Earth that allowed this beautiful situation that we were born into, that allowed this to occur. In order to do that, we must, firstly, of course, and we all know this, we must stop emitting carbon products into the atmosphere. That includes CH4, methane. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to stop emitting carbon dioxide. And I think an awful lot of people, and probably everybody watching this presentation, knows that. So we must do that, but it's not enough. There's a huge movement afoot to give the impression that that is sufficient. We just have to stop burning fossil fuels. We have to do this, do that. Wrong. And the reason for that is we now, right now, have about 420 parts per million of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. Never in recorded history, and by recorded history, I mean recorded in the ice cores of Earth, numbers we can, data we can, that's been trapped and captured, and we can go back to, we've never been above 300. And right now we're at 420. So all of those previous ice ages and those ups and downs peaked at right around 300 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, and then went back down again into the 200 somewhere. We're at 420. The effects we're seeing right now with the crazy weather, with the outrageous, out of control fires, with this sea level rise that is just beginning, that is the effect of, we're seeing about 330 parts per million. So it's like there's a lag. It doesn't happen immediately. It takes decades for this to kick in. So at 420, there's no possible way that anything recognizable in terms of life is going to remain on this planet, or at least in terms of civilization. There may be a few wealthy, formerly wealthy people in bunkers waiting 250,000 years before they come out and see what's going on. You know, you might be able to survive with, but that's a technological solution to something that's not even thinkable. So stopping emissions is not enough. It must be done, but it's not sufficient. The second thing we must do is we must begin to remove carbon dioxide from Earth's atmosphere. And as I've just said, we can do that. We can do it profitably. We can make a major business venture out of it. Therefore, there's a very good chance, in my opinion, that it will happen. If there's money to be made, guess what? People show up. And a little later, I will show you my personal solution and our team's solutions, something called the Enviroplex, a way of combining regenerative organic agriculture with carbon capture and taking the carbon dioxide thus captured and converting it into useful, marketable products. So that is step number 2. Step number 3, and this, I'm personally not addressing this, but I am involved with people who are, is we have to restore the Arctic and the Antarctic ice. Because if we don't, firstly, I think everybody knows that there's a problem with regard to the melting of the Arctic sea ice. What that is resulting in up north, on the shores of Siberia, for example, is the permafrost is melting. And that permafrost is a cap on top of a huge, 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 inconceivably huge amount of methane, captured as methane hydrates. And as that permafrost melts, the methane is in real danger of being released in what is known as a methane burp or an outbreak. It is happening already in countless tiny little, it's bubbling up from under the water. There was a film recently called Ice on Fire, where they actually went out and punctured holes in the ice and then put a flame there, and a column of flame shot up. You can actually burn this stuff directly out of the ice up north. We are in an exceedingly dangerous situation in that regard. That's a big job, and to be honest, I don't know where the return on investment is in solving that. I do know that it's worth doing because what we actually get as return on investment is a planet, is a useful planet. The single most dangerous thing right now is the methane that has been trapped for God knows millions of years up north. It is about to be released into the atmosphere. Methane is roughly, I hear various numbers, but I think it's 84% more effective than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. It also lasts much longer. I'm sorry, its duration in the atmosphere is much shorter. CO2 lasts potentially 1,000 years in the atmosphere. We don't really know. Methane lasts about 10 years before it breaks down. It actually breaks down into carbon dioxide and water. It's oxidized by the atmosphere, by the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. So my friends, that's a very big deal. It's actually scary. It's terrifying. There are very interesting solutions being proposed. I sit in, for example, every Saturday on a conference on Zoom with a bunch of scientists from Cambridge University and other places, this global conference of science men and women who are working to address this. So that's a big deal, and it's beyond the scope of this conversation, but it needs to be on the table. So climate restoration involves stopping the emissions, extracting CO2 from the atmosphere, and refreezing the Arctic and the Antarctic. These are hugely challenging subjects. They come under the umbrella of geoengineering, and geoengineering is regarded widely as something that's dangerous. We shouldn't go near it. Well, we've been geoengineering our planet since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and we're seeing the very beginnings of the extraordinary consequences of what we have been doing. So we have to wake up, we have to grow up, we have to show up and do something about it. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start to talk about a solution, an integrated, nested set of solutions, taking well-established technologies, chemistry, chemical engineering processes, integrated into a system, and I'd love your thoughts on it. And this does include a technology that came to us from our friend Bill Tooley, and he will be speaking specifically on his project, which, Bill, should I call it the Enviro Farm? Is that a good term
for it, Andrew?
Excellent. Okay, good. And I'm gonna now share my screen and move into solutions. So we know the problem, we've looked at the job we have to do, and here is our startup company's proposal as to what to do about it, how to do it, how to make it globally deployable. It's almost like a military situation. You don't build a tank or an airplane. You build a whole bunch of them in a production mode that can then be deployed to wherever it's needed on the planet. That's the overarching idea behind this. Let's make this thing, we're not just going to build one and see what happens. We're going to build one as the first, because there's got to be a first, and then we're going to replicate these things and get them deployed worldwide. And interestingly, the first thing investors say is, well, who's your market? Well, back in 2015, and that's 5 years ago, friends, we came to a global agreement called the Paris Climate Accord to do certain things. And I cannot honestly think of a country that has succeeded in doing that yet, to meeting their obligations and their obligations. It's been regarded as too expensive, too difficult. There's been resistance from financial interests and political interest. It's actually gone the other way, radically the other way. We've gone a long way in the wrong direction, in my opinion, these last 5 years. So where's your market? There's your market. Every country that signed that agreement, every municipality within every one of those countries is a potential customer for what we're about to talk about. So we are at 20 minutes after the hour. We have another 40 minutes to go here, and I would like to share my screen at this point. I think I know how to do that, so let me do that, Bill. And why don't you, Bill, would you consider just giving a little bit, while I do this, you understand what I'm doing very well, what our team is doing. You're part of that team. What are we doing, Bill? Can you tell us that? And I'll go ahead and figure out the screen sharing thing.
This is where Andrew and I came together 5 years ago, or however long it's been. In that 10 years ago, I had started on preventing methane from entering the atmosphere. And going down that path, we soon learned was not sufficient. It was necessary, but it was not sufficient. So I met Andrew, and we both wrung our hands over the fact that what we really needed was something to not just prevent carbon from entering the atmosphere, but to extract the carbon that's already overpopulated in the atmosphere. And neither one of us had a solution at that time. Andrew then went off and found some inspiration in various places, came back and said, Bill, I've got it. We can do this, and we can do this efficiently without a tremendous amount of energy. We can do this profitably. We can do this renewably. We can actually pull air out of the atmosphere, extract the carbon from it, and send the clean air, the less carbonized air, back into the atmosphere. And we can do that in the course of what we're working on in Enviro Farm. We can do that in the course of what Andrew now has before us called the EnviroPlex. In the course of our daily living, in the course of our daily working to feed ourselves, in the course of our daily activities, we can at the same time be cleaning carbon out of the air and making the quality of the environment that the people who participate in and the animals that participate in this make the quality of their life much, much better. I was just astounded, Andrew. I was so incredibly amazed at the seminal thoughts that you had entered. And it can only be a chemistry professor that would do something like this, for heaven's sakes. None of the rest of us would ever even think about it. But you've taken it so much farther. And that does not mean that we are not still in a working cooperation, which we are, because after we take the carbon out of the atmosphere, we then have to get about the business that we were working on 10 years ago to keep it out of the atmosphere. That's still an ongoing project. But the immediate project that Andrew has addressed is something called the EnviroPlex, and it's a methodology for installing systems into ordinary human and animal environments that will allow those environments in the course of their ventilation processes to extract carbon from the atmosphere continuously, 24 hours a day.
Beautiful, Bill. Thank you. That's the best introduction we've ever had. So thank you, Bill. For those watching, Bill Tooley is a scientist himself. He's an inventor himself. He has an extraordinary patented technology, which he will share with you in about 15 minutes. So stay on for that, please. I'm going to go through a few slides here and just move fairly rapidly, and we'll stop. And if anybody has questions, feel free to interject. If you're watching and you're on this call, please do. This is part of World Unity Week. We are at the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere of the year 2020. And I'm going to take us very quickly through a few slides here. So you'll note at the top that we called it Sacred Earth Enterprises. Mother Earth, Mama Gaia, Pachamama, Sacred Earth. This is a sacred duty that we humans have. So I'm not shy about saying that right in the name of our company. Our entity name is Sacred Earth Enterprises. And if you read, if you look at the picture of our building there, you'll see the title, the EnviroPlex, and the subtitle or the tagline there, the heart of a global climate restoration strategy. So what we're offering here is a global climate restoration strategy. And it has at the bottom there, the elements are firstly research, education, community, and action. So next slide, let's see if it works. Oh, look at that. So I'm going to reiterate something I just said, which is to answer the question, what is climate restoration? Climate restoration is the urgent global endeavor to return the Earth's climate systems to the safe and healthy state from which humanity and our natural world evolved. This requires returning atmospheric CO2 to proven safe levels of less than 300 parts per million and restoring sufficient Arctic sea ice to prevent permafrost melt and the resulting catastrophic methane emissions. Climate restoration is complementary to ongoing CO2 emission reduction and mitigation efforts, can be profitable, and is attracting the attention of impact investors. Sacred Earth Enterprises is committed to restoring Earth's climate and ensuring a safe, habitable planet for our children and grandchildren. The company, and I don't want to make this a pitch for the company, but I think I'd like to present this as an example of something we can do. A small group of people, there's between 15 and 20 people on our team. Our youngest person is just turned 17 years old. She is an extraordinary climate activist from New York City. The oldest person, Bill, who's older, you or me? How old are you, Bill?
We'll argue about that later, Andrew.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. So there are some elders involved here. We are multi-generational. We have literally every decade of age in our team, on our team. It's an interesting group. It's a brilliant group. And the one thing that we don't have is the funding to put our vision to work. And that is obviously the thing that stops most of these projects in their tracks. So let's just tell you about the company we've started here. The company is a Colorado-based startup with a global vision. We'll help countries and communities reach their sustainable development goals, increase food security, mitigate climate damage, generate substantial return on investment, and more. Over the past 5 years, the company and its affiliates have developed proprietary technological designs that address a $10 billion plus market opportunity. The company has designed modular, mass-producible, rapid deployment climate restoration systems, which will remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere while providing food, shelter, employment, and economic, environmental, educational, social, and health benefits to the communities in which it is deployed. Our evolving team includes experts in the fields of systems design and integration, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, direct air carbon capture, green architecture, alternative energy, 3D printing, blockchain technology, corporate law, and business. The company has developed important affiliations with the Expert Company, which happens to be Bill Tooley's company, and is focused on regenerative organic farming, the Foundation for Climate Restoration, the Healthy Climate Alliance, the Institute of Economics, and related business entities and academic institutions. We're actually working with a couple of colleges down in New Mexico. That's a very interesting potential unfolding there that we were in deep negotiations with when the coronavirus thing hit. So we'll see how that unfolds. Our mission is to reduce the amount of fossil carbon in Earth's atmosphere, increase food security, provide jobs and shelter, eliminate avoidable human health costs, and mitigate climate damage. We will research, design, develop, license, manufacture, market, and manage the world's most effective climate restoration technologies and strategies. By the way, we're not in competition with there's a lot of people thinking these thoughts and developing these ideas. We are not in competition with anyone. We are wide open to collaboration. If we don't collaborate together on this subject, we're in big trouble. We will advise philanthropic organizations, impact investors, community and business leaders, and heads of state on strategic options and emerging investment opportunities. And we will realize abundant profits for our investors, strategic partners, and customers while restoring a healthy planet for future generations. So that's big picture of what we are setting out to do here. Checking the time, we are good. So the problem, we all know the problem. Planet Earth faces imminent, irreversible climate damage caused by extreme weather, catastrophic fires, and sea level rise that is already triggering an unprecedented global refugee crisis. The cause, I think we know the cause. Since the 1700s, human activities have released an estimated 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into Earth's atmosphere. And that picture, I took that picture from an airplane. That is down below is Mexico City. Doesn't it look beautiful? What a gorgeous city. That is the air quality in Mexico City last March as we flew up out of Mexico City and headed south toward Guatemala. Nice, huh? So the solution. So that was the problem. And here's the solution. The trillion tons of excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the mining opportunity of the millennium. Integrating photosynthesis, biology, and chemical engineering, the company reframes a dangerous quote unquote problem into an array of profitable opportunities. Anyone paying attention knows we must stop releasing greenhouse gases or GHGs into the atmosphere. Additionally, we must immediately start removing GHGs from the atmosphere. Our installations will do both. Deployed at scale, they will reduce the net amount of GHGs emitted into the atmosphere while removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and converting it into organic food and fertilizer, so-called green concrete, high-value crops, fuels, soil additives, carbon fiber products, and other valuable merchandise. In collaboration with our affiliated companies, we can help to restore Earth's climate and return large-scale food production to its original chemical-free natural state. And at the 2020 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, climate restoration was described as, quote, a multi-trillion dollar market opportunity. Everybody with us so far? So here's a fun graphic that I created to show the potential here. You ready? This is fun. You're allowed to giggle. Climate restoration, an exponential global business opportunity. And this is just roughing out where we started back there at the bottom left, down in 2015, moving on up through 2020, 2024, 2030, and up to 2040. And we started out, our current value of our company is very little. I think there's been a total investment of about $120,000 in everything to date. But by 2016, we can see we're up to 5 million. At 2020, we're at 100 million. At 2024, we hit our first billion. And at 2040, we're up there around 10 billion. This is annual business. It's pretty extraordinary. And this may sound absolutely crazy, but I work with a guy named Peter Diamandis. You may have heard of him. He started something called the Singularity University. He's the exponential business guy. An example of an exponential business is Google or Airbnb or Uber or one of these companies that starts out as an idea and starts in a garage and like Microsoft and is very small. Nobody gives it, nobody's going to invest in it. And all of a sudden it's the biggest thing there is. This venture has that potential, my friends. And yeah, at the bottom, there's a quote there, which again is from the World Economic Forum. It was a headline: new private sector investments signal major tipping point for emerging multi-trillion-dollar market opportunity. And if you look at the copyright there, copyright 2017 Green University, you've probably all heard of Brown University. My daughter is a Brown University graduate. But guess what? I said at that time in the 90s, when she was at Brown, I said, Brown University, how about Green University? And I actually started the very first distance learning online entity that was dedicated to issues of environment and climate, etc. It was called Green University. We were never able to get it off the ground. We didn't get investment. I had kids at USC and Brown University, and I simply was financially incapable of doing much more than what I was doing at the time. So anyway, that's a little bit of background on me. Here's our team. Here's last year's team. So there's me, the scientist and the visionary officer. James Plagman, who's a beautiful green architect, extraordinary man, very deeply knowledgeable about all things to do with construction and architecture and environment in general. Mackenzie McAleer and his dad are currently building systems to send growing systems up through NASA up to the International Space Station so they can actually grow those crops that Mackenzie is so proudly holding there up and be able to grow food in space. That's one of the many things he does, and he's one of our advisors and team buddies. Connie Marlowe is an economics person, has extraordinary visions, and she's my personal supporter and partner. My son Java Bailey, MBA, is another exceptional advisor in the realm of fiscal strategy and business startup strategy. Sally Ranney, you may or may not have heard of. She's the better half of a guy named Ted Turner. You've probably heard of him. And she has something called the, what is it called? Oh my goodness, I had a blank there. She is, okay, so she was the White House environmental chief officer under 4 previous administrations, including Carter, Reagan, and Clinton. Major background, Sally, dear friend and real advisor and supporter of us here. And finally, there's William F. Tooley, our co-host and guest on this presentation. And I know you will enjoy everything he has to say. Let's move on here. Just want to time this so we have adequate time for Bill's part of it. So, okay, so products and projects. We've developed some very serious projects that are patentable, patented, and or protected under the blockchain technology that's interesting, including the carbon capture module, the Enviroplex, several versions of it, and something that I've called the Bailey Synergy Tower. I put my name on it, and that name is for sale. If somebody wants to call it the Fred Smith Synergy Tower and is willing to provide the funding, it will become the Fred Smith Synergy Tower. And other projects include co-ventures with the Enviro Farm team and the proposed Enviro Village co-housing network. The Enviro Village, by the way, is a proposal to build 3D printed villages from concrete accessed from CO2 from Earth's atmosphere. So I could give you, I'll continue quickly here. The carbon capture module is a multi-purpose, mass-producible 36-foot by 9-foot by 2-foot structural wall array, which removes CO2 from the atmosphere. The CO2 is converted to a stable, harmless, water-soluble compound and stored in a holding tank, awaiting water recovery, concentration, and conversion to marketable materials. The full-scale Enviroplex is a 1-acre, 150-foot by 300-foot modular mass-producible building, which uses multiple carbon capture units and provides economic, environmental, educational, social, and health benefits to the community in which it is installed. The basic shell can be erected in less than a week on a perimeter foundation. Its primary functions are large-scale air purification and organic food production, while permanently capturing and repurposing the atmospheric CO2 passing through it. The Enviroplex will generate marketable secondary products from the captured CO2, such as organic fertilizer in the case of the livestock-based version, organic food, high-value crops, fuels, building materials, soil additives, and carbon fiber composites for 3D printing. It would also provide leasable, pollution-free indoor space, at least 50,000 square feet per unit, for a wide variety of applications. I'm going to skip this one. What the carbon capture module does, there's a list, and you can find this on the internet. If you go to the website, just go to sacredearthenterprises.us, you'll find us. So now, the building itself, the Enviroplex. And I think we've already said this. The Enviroplex is a modular, mass-producible installation which integrates organic agriculture with CO2 removal. Yeah. Here's a cross-section, a cutout, so we can see into the building. From left to right, there's sections there. If you look to your left, you will see the Enviro Barn, which is a Bill Tooley term. And there's a vegetarian or vegan version of this building. And there's the livestock-based version. There are 2 different versions. Obviously, you couldn't have a livestock version in the middle of a city. This thing could be placed in the middle of the city. It could even be placed on the roof of a flat roof building such as a Walmart or a factory or a warehouse. They're designed, and as you can see, it's composed entirely of slabs. These slabs can be mass produced. Ultimately, they will be mass produced from carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the whole thing is simply an erector set. It arrives in a container on a building site. The foundation is in place, a crane arrives, and up goes this structure, and we fire it up. And ultimately, we don't even have to pour a huge concrete slab, because we can get the concrete over time and convert it gradually. The interior has a concrete floor, and the concrete is coming from the CO2 in the atmosphere. It's a pretty crazy vision. And here's a cross section. This is the livestock version. There's some happy little piggies, and poultry. Chickens love pigs. They kind of love each other, and the chickens can be up above, the pigs below. The pigs have access to the outside world. They come and go. The chickens do the same thing. That's the Enviro Farm, the left-hand section there. And then the central part is the greenhouse vertical farm, which is a food production system that is also capturing carbon dioxide, because every molecule of CO2 that goes into creating a lettuce or a cabbage or a carrot is a molecule of CO2 that has been captured and repurposed. Now, I confess that if you come over and you buy a lettuce and take it home to your family, that CO2 eventually ends up in the atmosphere, which we have to eat. So then what happens is any CO2 remaining goes into the right-hand section, which is 50%. It's 22,500 square feet on the ground. The air proceeds from the greenhouse through a filtration system, and at that point, there are, I think if you can see at the very bottom level there, the carbon capture modules remove all of the CO2, pretty much 100% of it, from the air that passes into the multi-purpose space. That multi-purpose space can be used, it's real estate, it's available for rent. It can be anything from movie theaters to accommodations to hospital or college or anything you want to use, anything humans use buildings for, this is available for that purpose. And then the people in there add some more CO2 to it simply by breathing the air and exhaling the CO2. And if you look at the very top there, you'll see the scrubber up at the top, and the last of the CO2 is captured, and the clean air output at the very top, let's say the wind is blowing from right to left, and the output joins that wind, and it is filtered. It is completely clear of particulate matter, of things that cause cancer. It is free, pretty much 100%. We can get close to 100% free of carbon dioxide. And of course it goes in, and if there's no wind at all, a dome of pure, clean, CO2-free air sits over the building. And then as the breeze comes, it distributes and expands into the atmosphere. These devices have the potential to clean up the foul, filthy, polluted air that is generated by so many cities. Go to New Delhi, go to Mexico City, go to any of 100 major cities or more than that, and put a circle of these around the city. It provides everything we've been talking about, and it filters and cleans the air of those cities while they clean up their acts. Because those cities have to stop doing what they're doing, and we won't have that brown, filthy, hazy air causing so much damage to human health and the environment. So I'm going to stop at that point. I think there's a certain amount more, but that's fine. I really wanted to get to this point where you could see the cross section of the Enviroplex. And what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Mr. Tooley and have him add his entity that he's been working on with his elder brother for a long time now, since I think it was the early 80s. So Bill Tooley, will you take it away from this point, and I will stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Bill.
I really enjoyed the re-description of what you're doing, and you've brought me up to date very, very nicely in where you're at. It's very clear and very pertinent to the task that we face. Back in 1978, Cameroon, West Africa, decided that it was time to provide dairy and milk products for its children who hadn't had anything except powdered milk for 30 or 40 years. So they called on my brother and I to take a trip there and to propose what we now call an Enviro Farm, a complete production system that would allow the country to produce its own milk products for its families. It was an exciting project, perhaps the largest dairy project undertaken in Africa up to that point. And we were honored to be invited to comment on how to do it. There are many anecdotes that emerge from that. But that was my start. It was my older brother. I could speak French, so he dragged me along just to be helpful to him. And I began to learn the things that 50 years later, I'm enjoying immensely. Fast forward to 2009, 2010, the USDA realized that agriculture was a contributor to climate change, and that greenhouse gas was emerging from not just livestock facilities, but also overused fertilizer lying on farm fields. They asked for proposals for how to prevent that, how to prevent agriculture from contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions that needed to be come down. And so we put together a project which showed that if we would aerate, oxygenate the manure lagoons, you would know them as sewage lagoons, but in livestock, it's very, very different than that. They actually produce fertilizer if you can transform it into, but through composting, if you can transform it into organic fertilizer for organic crops. So we put in a proposal, they accepted it. We went to 11 different farms in 3 different states. We took floating oxygenation circulators and placed them on the water of the lagoons and turned them on. They're very simple devices. These devices simply draw water from below and spread it across the surface. When they do that, the water is reoxygenated. The result is what I refer to as liquid composting. I know that's a strange concept for any of you who have any idea of composting, but it's so much simpler than solid composting because you don't have to lift it, turn it, and all like that. The outcomes showed us that when we oxygenate and circulate a very high intensity livestock waste storage facilities, we in fact eliminate greenhouse gas, methane to be precise, from emerging from those facilities, and it's gone. That was exciting, immensely exciting for us. We had achieved our goal at an energy input that the farmer could actually afford, but a number of more important or equally important things happened. We ask ourselves, what happens after we stop putting methane into the atmosphere? Andrew's answer is we still have CO2 in the atmosphere. What do we do about that? That's how he and I got together, and that's why he has developed the extraction processes that he's using for taking carbon back out of the atmosphere. So my follow-on question was, after we've got carbon back out of the atmosphere, how do we keep the atmosphere healthy and enjoyable and worthwhile for our children and our grandchildren? And our partnership just formed automatically. You can't really succeed at one without also doing the other, and you can't do the other without the first one going on. So what we learned was it was not just methane that didn't come out of the lagoons. There's another thing that comes out of sewage lagoons and livestock waste storage facilities, and that's ammonia. I say the word ammonia, I get almost no reaction from anybody. It's like, you know, it's in bleach, it's under the counter of my kitchen. So the reality is this: ammonia is 1/2 of what's called PM 2.5 pollution. That's what you saw over Mexico City when in Andrew's photo a little earlier as the plane was flying by. Particulate matter, PM 2.5, is the material that's the smallest dimension of a particle that you might breathe. And it goes deep into your lungs and never comes out. It is formed from a combination in the atmosphere. It forms in the atmosphere chemically. It's formed from a combination of ammonia and other oxides like automobile exhaust, factory pollution, utility smoke, and that sort of thing. Once those two materials meet in the atmosphere, they form a small particulate matter that now invades and infests everything. How bad is the problem today? A study done about 3 years ago, the first one of its kind, measured the health impact of PM 2.5, which requires ammonia to form. And that health impact was $279 million per year in the US alone. I'll repeat, $279 million of degraded health. That included not just elder emphysema. You see a lot of gray hair around here. We worry about that. We don't want to breathe too much of this stuff, or we'll end up not having a long and happy life, which we're hoping for. But worse, it affects children. The incidence of childhood asthma has skyrocketed over the past 30 or 40 years. And where is it occurring most? No, not in the polluted cities where children go indoors and turn on their air conditioners and filter their air. Increased childhood asthma is occurring most in rural areas where children still play outside. And it's partly caused by the ammonia coming from the livestock lagoons and from the excess fertilizer that's placed on the fields. So what happened is we noticed in the measurements that we were taking that we had completely eliminated the production of ammonia. And in doing so, we transformed what was ammonia into a very parallel compound called ammonium. And ammonium is a direct liquid fertilizer that can go immediately onto crops and they can take it up. So the farmer was very happy. We had just produced a profitable product and he could stop buying so much fertilizer from the store. But there were several other things as well. The desperation that agriculture is in and that we all are affected by is the lack of nutrients in the food that we buy in the store. Why does the food lack nutrients? Because we don't have the soil health we need to provide the micronutrients to the plants that are growing. Why don't we have the soil health we need? Because the soil is being fed with nitrogen and phosphorus, and the plants are extracting or have already extracted most of the micronutrients that have been stored there for our benefit over the past thousands of years. And our topsoils are now shrunk. How far have they shrunk? You might recall that this is the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims' arrival in North America. At that time, it was guessed that we had an average of 18 inches of topsoil. Some places it was 18 feet. But on average, all over the country, it was 18 inches. Today, the USDA measures topsoil annually on its fields. 10 years ago, when we started this project, we had 50% of American farm fields rated by the USDA as degraded. What does that mean? It means that that farmer can't raise the same amount of crop next year that he raised last year, unless he adds more nitrogen and phosphorus, which then works to extract more of the micronutrients from the soil and speed up the process. To give it a graphic format, the topsoil that we enjoy, that thin layer of material that feeds the entire planet, has been reduced in the 400 years that we've lived here from 18 inches on average to 4 inches on average. That's why 50% of our fields are degraded, because it takes 6 inches of topsoil on average to grow a crop. And so those fields that are below 6 are extremely degraded. 10 years ago, it was 54% measured degraded farm fields. Couldn't produce as much food next year as they did last year, unless you pile on the chemical fertilizer. When you do that, you add more ammonia to the atmosphere.
Bill, we're
Yes.
coming up on the end here. I'm looking at the clock, and we have 4 minutes till we hand this over. So my question for you then is, what has prevented you from really deploying this system of yours globally? It's incredible. I love it. And what is
a very simple answer.
I know the answer is money. And
no, the answer is habit. Farmers have been encouraged by the chemical companies to use chemicals on their fields and to just farm in an industrial chemical way, and so they do. And it turns out now we have a generation of farmers who have never farmed in any other way. So they don't know how to use organic inputs. They want to get the price of an organic crop, but they don't know how to do it. So what has really happened is that farmers are getting poorer and poorer and less able to afford changes right at the time when the most profitable change they could make, it becomes available to them. So it's the system that's in place, Andrew, that has caused the process not to take off.
All right, so I see some folks arriving, and they're probably welcome folks, and I imagine you're coming for the next presentation, but welcome to the tail end of this one. You've just been hearing Bill Tooley, who has an extraordinary regenerative organic agriculture project that is well developed. How many farms are currently using it in the American Midwest?
Probably 20 to 30.
20 to 30.
Very small number for a 10-year effort, and you can understand why.
It's the kind of thing, and I know his system very well, and I visited those farms with him. If that went global, it would make a huge difference to food, to health, to climate, to atmosphere, and it would be extraordinarily profitable. It's a paradigm shift that could really make a very big difference. So Bill Tooley, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me, Andrew.
Yeah, and I'm Andrew Bailey. It's been a pleasure and a delight presenting and sharing this. I shared something called the Enviroplex. I have a startup company called Sacred Earth Enterprises, and our mission is to make sure that future generations, and I believe I see someone from the next generation
here, yes.
To make sure that you and your children and your grandchildren to not the 7th generation, but the 7 times 7, the 49th generation, have a safe, habitable, beautiful planet like the one that I arrived in 70 some years ago. So friends, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye for now.
Be well, everybody.